Tensions between the United States and Iran intensified sharply after former U.S. President Donald Trump publicly urged Iranian protesters to continue demonstrations and take over their institutions, a statement that immediately drew global attention. The remarks came amid ongoing nationwide protests in Iran, where security forces have been accused by international organizations of using lethal force to suppress dissent, deepening an already volatile political and humanitarian crisis. Trump's comments were issued through a public statement in which he directly addressed Iranian citizens, encouraging them not to retreat despite mounting pressure from authorities. He warned that those responsible for violence against protesters should have their names recorded, claiming accountability would eventually follow. The unusually direct message marked a departure from traditional diplomatic language and signaled a more confrontational rhetorical posture toward Tehran. The statement also included Trump's announcement that all meetings with Iranian officials had been canceled until what he described as the senseless killing of protesters comes to an end. This decision effectively froze any remaining diplomatic engagement and reinforced perceptions that Washington is willing to escalate political pressure rather than pursue quiet negotiations during the unrest unfolding across multiple Iranian cities. Iranian officials swiftly rejected Trump's remarks, accusing the United States of interfering in domestic affairs and attempting to inflame instability. Government-linked media outlets framed the comments as evidence of foreign orchestration behind the protests, a narrative frequently used by Tehran during periods of internal unrest. Authorities reiterated that national institutions would not yield to what they called external provocation or psychological warfare. The protests themselves were triggered by a combination of economic hardship, political repression, and public anger over governance failures. Human rights groups report that demonstrations spread rapidly despite internet blackouts and mass arrests, making independent verification difficult. The scale and persistence of the unrest have raised concerns among regional observers about the durability of Iran's internal stability in the near term. Trump's promise that help is on its way introduced further uncertainty, as no details were provided regarding the nature of such assistance. Analysts noted that the phrase could refer to diplomatic pressure, sanctions, information campaigns, or other indirect measures rather than immediate military action. The ambiguity has fueled speculation while also increasing anxiety among regional allies and adversaries alike. Within Washington, Trump's remarks sparked debate among policy experts and lawmakers over whether public encouragement of protests could escalate tensions or place demonstrators at greater risk. Critics warned that overt support from foreign leaders has historically been used by Iranian authorities to justify harsher crackdowns, while supporters argued moral clarity was necessary in the face of reported abuses. International reactions were cautious, with European governments calling for restraint and emphasizing the need to protect civilian lives. Several officials urged all parties to avoid language that could worsen violence or close remaining diplomatic channels. Meanwhile, global markets closely monitored developments, concerned that further instability could disrupt energy supplies and regional security arrangements. The situation is unfolding against the backdrop of already strained U.S.-Iran relations, shaped by years of sanctions, collapsed nuclear negotiations, and sporadic military confrontations. Trump's intervention adds another layer of complexity, potentially reshaping how both allies and rivals interpret Washington's long-term intentions toward Iran's political system. As protests continue and rhetoric hardens, observers warn that miscalculation on either side could have far-reaching consequences beyond Iran's borders. The combination of internal unrest, external pressure, and unresolved geopolitical disputes has created a fragile environment where statements alone may influence outcomes. The coming days are expected to test both Iran's internal resilience and international diplomacy. Iran's leadership responded to Trump's message by reinforcing security measures across major cities, signaling zero tolerance for what it described as foreign-backed unrest. Officials emphasized that national sovereignty would be defended at all costs, while state television broadcast footage portraying calm streets and loyalist rallies, contrasting sharply with reports from activists describing continued protests and confrontations. Human rights organizations have continued to document allegations of excessive force, including live ammunition, mass detentions, and closed trials. While Iranian authorities deny systematic abuse, the lack of independent access has intensified international skepticism. Trump's comments amplified attention on these allegations, placing renewed focus on Iran's handling of dissent and the credibility of its official narrative. Security analysts note that Trump's language represents a deliberate escalation in psychological pressure, rather than a formal policy shift. By directly addressing protesters, he bypassed traditional state-to-state diplomacy and appealed to public sentiment. Such messaging, experts argue, is designed to strain internal cohesion rather than provoke immediate external confrontation. Inside Iran, reactions to Trump's call were mixed. Some protesters viewed the statement as moral encouragement, while others expressed concern that visible foreign backing could undermine the legitimacy of their movement. Historically, Iranian protest movements have sought to frame their demands as domestically driven to avoid accusations of external manipulation. The Iranian government has repeatedly blamed Western governments for fueling unrest through media influence and covert support. Trump's public endorsement of protests may strengthen hardliners within the regime, who argue that compromise invites interference. This dynamic risks narrowing political space, just as internal pressure on leadership is mounting. Regional governments are closely watching the situation, aware that instability in Iran could ripple across the Middle East. Neighboring states have quietly increased security preparedness, particularly around energy infrastructure and shipping routes. Any prolonged unrest or escalation could disrupt trade flows and heighten already fragile regional tensions. Within the United States, Trump's remarks revived debate over the appropriate role of American leadership during foreign protest movements. Supporters framed his stance as a defense of human rights, while critics warned it could undermine international norms and provoke retaliation against civilians. The debate reflects broader divisions over intervention versus restraint. Diplomatic sources indicate that back-channel communications between Washington and Tehran remain limited, but have not entirely ceased. Despite Trump's declaration canceling meetings, intermediaries may still be active behind the scenes, attempting to prevent miscalculations. Public rhetoric, however, has made such efforts increasingly difficult.